Hello, everybody. Welcome. This is Jason White with Into the Fire, the #1 true crime podcast on this channel because it's the only one. So we're happy to be here tonight on May the 22nd, 2026, coming to you live from Tulsa this Memorial Day weekend. So I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight, and hopefully you're going to have a really good 3-day weekend. And I'm excited about being here tonight and spending my evening with you. And so that's going to be good. We have Lora Teutsch. She was supposed to be episode number 94, and you saw what happened last week. And there she is. And I'm going to tell you something. She was devastated. She was devastated. We got all that problem ironed out, and essentially it was probably an Apple problem. It wasn't even a her problem. It was more of an Apple issue, and we've ran into that before. So I felt so bad for her because she goes, I was in tears on my way home. And I was like, no. Hey, Danny, it's good to have you here. It's good to have Travis here. We got Phyllis Lee, Okie Crime News. Okay. I don't know that I've seen you in here before, but I like it. Tell me where you're at in Oklahoma. I'd like to see that. And so forth. Body by Phil. I don't know that I've seen that one either. So if you're new here tonight, welcome. I appreciate you all being here. This is live. I prefer to go live each and every week. This is episode number 95. And I think that Danny came on last week and he helped me out. Danny's working tonight. So if we get into a crazy situation, we may end up having him come on. And he said he's got good Apple, and we may have him come on anyway. He's a first responder. He's a paramedic. He's a critical care paramedic in Middle Tennessee. And, but anyway, Sapulpa. Okie Crime News is in Sapulpa. And you were in here last week. Okay, thanks for reminding me. I've had a busy couple of weeks, believe me. I've been out on the streets for about a week and a half. The last 2 days, I was teaching at the academy. Hello, Travis from Muskogee PD. And you interested in hearing how my switch to patrol was? Well, let's see. It's been pretty seamless. I was supposed to have, I told him I wanted a training officer for about a month to 2 months. That lasted 2 days before I said, I think I'm good. I'm gonna, if I need something, I will call somebody and I will ask them to help me. And now there was an auto pedestrian accident that came out today from another area of the city. And I was like, they gave it to me and I was like, no, in my police car. I was like, no, I can't do a wreck. So fortunately, one of the traffic guys came on there. But today I had the privilege of meeting one of those auditors, those Second Amendment auditors. That was, that's never fun. And I got to meet that guy, and that was a very unpleasant experience, I can promise you. And so I had nerves of steel, and I remained calm at every turn. And we prevented it from going old school. So that was good. But old school came through my mind, I can promise you. It really did. But I have a body camera now, which is really, it's nice, and that's a good thing to have. So, but anyway, it's going to be a good week. Lora Teutsch is from Louisiana, and she's going to come on here. She's a counselor to first responders. And I thought, what a perfect person to bring on, considering I have just hit the streets, and I have not discussed any of this with any of that. And so Travis he's asking me about the challenges and so forth. Well, the challenges about being on the streets, buddy. He's a cop in Muskogee. I didn't wear a camera ever in my whole career. And the biggest advancement back in the day when I became a cop was they came to me and they said, hey, open up that box. That's something you're going to be using now. And I said, oh yeah, what's this? And they said, that's called a lapel mic. And that was like one of the biggest advances when I first became a cop. So it has come a long ways since then. And it's not like I've been the boy in the bubble. I mean, I've been out there and dealing with people for years. I dealt with them in interview rooms for years and stuff. But it's a lot different when you're in a police car with lights and sirens and all this other stuff. And you got to remember that if you hit your siren or if you hit your lights and stuff, it engages not only your camera, but everybody that's a cop around you. And so that's just kind of the way it goes. But so anyway, we're going to bring Lora on. Lora, why don't you just come on and join us? And I want to welcome
Hey guys.
you. She is a bundle of energy, and I saw her speak down in Louisiana, down in Marksville, Louisiana, which is in Cajun country. I don't want to saying Cajun is not a derogatory term because I asked. They said no, they're actually proud of that. But it is in Cajun, it's in the Cajunville area, believe me. And so I met her. I saw her down there. I'd met her. I talked to her, and then she says, "Hey, I'm one of the presenters." And I was like, "That's great." And so based on that, I said, "You know what? I'm going to watch your presentation." And that's exactly what I did. And I watched the entire thing, and she was full of energy, and she was talking. And that's tough when you're a counselor going in there, or you got it. And you had a big turnout in that room, actually, didn't you?
I did. I was really surprised. And when I saw you walk through the door, I thought, no pressure at all. It's the guy from First 48. No pressure at all, but I was so excited to have you there.
Oh, I was stoked. And listen, I appreciate that. And that was a fun conference. And so anyway, tell us a little bit about are you from Louisiana, and tell us a little bit about who you are, and tell us a little bit about your background as to what it takes to become a counselor.
Okay. I am from Louisiana, born and raised in Shreveport, Louisiana. My mom is actually a Yankee. My dad is from Missouri. They met in DC and moved to Dallas, and then here, and here's where I was born. So I've lived here my entire life. And so again, I actually live in Bossier City, which is right across the river from Shreveport, separated by the Red River. We are the home of the B-52s. So that's always fun. But yeah, so I was a high school teacher for 15 years. So you talking about being in the trenches. I learned a lot about behavior. And then I decided to go back. It was really weird because being a teacher, when you get that degree, if you just get your bachelor's degree, you're pretty well stuck. So you have to go back and get a master's to be able to do anything with that. And I thought, well, I think counseling would be good in case I ever decide to leave the profession. I could go and do something else. So after 15 years, I finally, I was done. So went into counseling. What I didn't realize is when I got my master's degree from Louisiana Tech University, I thought once I graduated, I could start practicing. What I didn't know is that you have to do a 2-year internship or a residency, kind of like med schools do. Yeah. Didn't know that. So I did my residency for Promise Hospital. It was an intensive outpatient program. So I worked with schizophrenics for about 2 years. So it takes about 2 years to get licensed. And I learned some really interesting things. And honestly, as long as schizophrenics kind of are medicated, they're really great people. And then eventually I went into private practice, and I've been doing this, I think now for 6 or 7 or 8 years now. But working with first responders really in the last several years has been my passion. My husband is a Shreveport fireman. My youngest son is a Shreveport fireman. And then my oldest son is an intelligence officer for the Air Force. So I've lived this for 26 years with my husband. And I see what has happened over the years. And I find that, unfortunately for our first responders, is we're more reactive than we are proactive. And that has to change. And so that's what I'm working really hard to do, is to get into these academies and to get into these departments and really start doing things a little bit differently. So again, we're taking a more proactive approach to try to maybe prevent some PTSD from happening. That's my goal.
Was there anything that kind of happened that, in your opinion, that really put this on the radar for these first responder agencies, from the police, fire, medics, and whatever else that's under that umbrella? Was there anything that you think happened that really kind of made these departments realize that this is serious? and for them to do something?
I think, I mean, if I think about critical incidences, I just did the last 2 days, I've done a CISM training, and I look at, 9/11 was a big thing, the Oklahoma City bombing. We kind of saw like, okay, things with our first responders aren't okay. So I think that that's where it kind of started, but I don't think it has really come to fruition until probably the last year or so. And I will tell you, I feel, unfortunately, several weeks ago, we had a mass shooting where we lost 8 children. 8 children were executed. And I think that is the first time that I actually saw the departments come together and really start to take mental health of our officers and our firefighters and paramedics really seriously. I think that's when it hit home that, what, guys, we got to do something different, because I mean, they are stuffing trauma in a box every single day, and they're still responding to calls, and nobody's unpacking their boxes. And unfortunately, over, a 30-year career, those boxes get really heavy. And we do see statistically that a lot of suicides occur after they retire. And I think it's because they're heavy and they don't know what to do with it.
Yeah, I think also once they retire, they're out of the cool kids club. That's it. Nobody calls them anymore, and
No, no.
and you're out of that loop. I'm experiencing that right now. I mean, I've been in homicide for 17 years basically, and
Yeah.
I'm not in that circle anymore. So it's an adjustment and so
Yes.
forth. So that's it's
Absolutely.
almost, you try not to make it your identity, but I think that how could you not? I mean, that's just kind of part of who you are and what you do, especially when you wear a
Right.
uniform every day. But
Right.
all right, so that's interesting. So what kind of happens to kind of, just to explain to people that are coming in here, I think that Travis, who works for Muskogee, he's got an idea. Danny, of course, that's in the room, and he's got an idea as to what goes on here. Of course,
Right.
I'm sure that they've had critical incidences of their own. I know
Mhm.
I've had plenty of those myself. So
Yeah.
what kind of happens to the officer? Let's just pick a first responder or an officer. What
Okay.
what happens as they go along in their journey in their career? What kind of happens upstairs if they, what kind of happens along the way?
And the
I know
one thing that
everybody's
I
different, but
yeah, and that's the key thing. I spend a lot of time at my husband's fire station, and I sit around the table talking to the guys. And one of them asked me the other day. They said, Laura, what happens when you have 5 guys that make a call? They all make the same call. They all hear and see all the same stuff, but yet some will be okay with it and some won't. And I said, that's a really good question. Why do some people respond one way while others respond another way? So I love research. And what I found out is it's how we're equipped and what we're resourced with, and how we develop when we're younger. So if you grew up in a household where mom and dad were MIA and you were pretty much raising yourself, there's a lot of things that you missed out on, a lot of things of how to cope with things. And so growing up as an adult, you start seeing you go to these incidences, right? And you don't know how to cope with it, or maybe you just stuff it, or you drink it away, or, you act like it doesn't happen. But unfortunately, that's not the way our brain and our body work. And so over a career, a lot of guys, they just will end up exploding. And, unfortunately, I was visiting with Jo Terry from Kentucky. She is the founder of the Chip Terry Foundation. Her husband, Chip, was an Ohio firefighter for over 30 years, and he retired. And unfortunately, he was misdiagnosed with an addiction instead of PTSD first. And so he committed suicide. So a lot of times, we see officers change. We see the firefighters change, the paramedics, and again, every single one of them is different. So you kind of can't put all of them in the same box. You have to treat them individually. But I've seen some do great. My husband, God love him, he does really well with processing things. He and I talk a lot. Maybe that's why he does so well, is we talk about, what calls he went on and what he saw and what he heard and, how he feels about it. So I think too, the support that you also have at home and within your community matters too.
Oh, I think that's a huge part of it for sure. I know for me growing up, when I start just to share a little bit about me, my dad was a highway patrolman in the 70s in
Hmm.
California and in LA, and he worked a mother load of traffic fatalities. I mean,
Oh,
a mother load. And I would hear these stories. I mean, and I was a kid, but
yeah,
it's not like he took me under his wing and said, "Here, come here, let me tell you the story about this fatal I
right,
worked last night." That wasn't the way it was, but you were around your parents, and you would hear him talking about it or sharing something with my mother or other people and maybe
right,
and so I think that somewhat in my brain, I think that may have desensitized me somewhat to just death initially, and then
right,
and
right,
so forth. But therefore, and then I got into the industry in the burn center and stuff at 18 years old.
right,
And I look back on it, I look at my kids and how old they are, and there's no way in the world they could have ever coped with anything like that at 18 years old. They
right.
just not even close. But
Yeah.
anyway, I don't know. So I think that might have something to do with it as well.
Yeah.
But
Well, I think, and your parents, again, talking about it, your parents probably normalized it. So maybe it wasn't so much desensitization as listening to them talk, but watching them how they dealt with it and how they coped with it. And so I think, hey, you learned some positive coping with it, hopefully. And I think they normalized it. Unfortunately, those things are abnormal. But I think that the lens in which you view things changed for sure.
yeah, yeah. So things are happening in your area, and
Oh, yes, they are.
they're really making this a huge priority. They're allowing you to. Are you going to attend? Are you going to attend the entire academy, or is it just in parts or
It's
whatever
it,
you want?
yeah, it's going to be in parts. So in North Bossier, there's Benton, Louisiana. So their fire department has hired me to be their mental health consultant. And so some of the things that I will do is EAP services. So I will provide their staff with counseling. They're letting me in their academies to teach about trauma, to teach about coping skills, how to build resiliency, to make sure that when they start out that they have the tools and the equipment they need to be able to deal with what they do. I know in our CISM training today, Danny Adams from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, was our trainer. And I don't know how many times he would say, hey guys, these are things that y'all can teach in your academy classes. Here is where you can change the ball game with how to maybe try to prevent some of the way they respond to these traumatic experiences. And of course, some of my Benton guys were sitting next to me, and I kind of looked forward and I said, see, that's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. You got to let me in these academies.
Yeah.
And so, because there's these, unfortunately, the generation that is coming up, they do not have the tools, they do not have the skills that are going to be needed to do the job that is going to be required of them. And that's unfortunate. It's very unfortunate, but doesn't mean that we can't teach those. It doesn't mean that we can't fill their toolbox with those tools before they even hit the streets. We can do that.
What
So
is
that's
what
what
is
I'm
it
hoping.
about? Well, what is it about this generation that's the what is it about this generation that's different from our generation per se? What
Well,
is it that happened in their upbringing that's changed and different?
so I did some research on that, and I was going back through some of my trauma training notes. And the one thing that I learned is that vicarious trauma was not even a term, or it wasn't really used in the mental health world until 1989. So vicarious trauma didn't even come on the market or in the field until 1989. So I started thinking, okay, what's going on with that? I think this younger generation, I think they are exposed more to trauma than our generation was. I didn't have as my mother-in-law would say, God love her, the ticky talk. I didn't have the ticky talk. We didn't have, access to Facebook and Instagram. We didn't have, all the movies that you can stream 1,000 movies and the video games. And so I think the younger generation, unfortunately, is being exposed to trauma, even vicariously at a higher level. And so I think their systems are dysregulated to begin with. And then we don't have the structure from communities or family to be able to help give them the skills to help them move through that. They don't know how to cope. They don't know how to cope.
Yeah. I've always kind of thought that, when we grew up, and I think we're pretty close to the same generation. And I think that when we grew up, I know in my house, there was a phone cord that was about 100 feet long, and I was on the phone for 3 hours a night. My mom was like, get off the phone. And nowadays, these kids, even my daughter goes to her room. Yeah. She doesn't really. I'm like, why don't you come on out and be part of the family?
Absolutely.
Come out here.
Absolutely.
And I try to do it, and it's like pulling teeth.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah. Interact with the living. That would be nice. Yes. Yeah. Interact with us. Yes.
And so that's got to have something to do with a lot of this.
Yeah. Always like this. Always check it.
Yeah. So when you're sitting there and you go, have you started to do this yet? I mean, is this like, it's groundbreaking right there in your area? Have you started counseling or opened up your counseling services to the first responders as we speak? That's been ongoing for a little bit.
Yes, absolutely. So when I went to Marksville and I spoke down in Marksville, I met Diana Sanchez, Lieutenant Diana Sanchez with the Shreveport Police Department. And she brought me in on her, I did 3 debriefings regarding the mass shooting with their officers. And once that happened, it was like my door was flung wide open. The number of first responders, from LEOs to firefighters, paramedics, that I have in my office right now, I have quite a few. It's just skyrocketed. And even after my workshop I did over the last 2 days, I think I'm probably going to have more coming in.
Good. I actually like that they're coming in. I mean, that's nothing wrong with that. That's what you want,
Absolutely, because we need to unpack these boxes. And a lot of when you look at the demographics of my clientele for first responders, I either get ones that are really young that have only been in it, 1, 2, or 3 years, and then I have ones that have been 25 or plus. And so with the guys and the women that I have that have been on 25 or more years, we're spending a lot of time unpacking our boxes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to share a quick story right quick, is that a lot of people don't know this, is that I happen to watch a presentation in reference to the Las Vegas massacre, really is what it was. That Las Vegas shootout from, what was that called? Montego Bay, or what I'm talking about. I can't remember the name of the casino, but and that happened, I think that was in 2017 when that thing happened. But when that occurred, I was speaking up in Canada, so I remembered I was glued to the television when the thing was going down. Yep. But when that thing ended up happening, a lot of people don't realize, but there was at least 3 police officers that literally quit on the spot. Mm-hmm. They were right there at the scene when this had happened, and in each one of these instances that I'm speaking of, they had less than 3 years on the police department. Mm-hmm. One guy specifically had 2 years on. He showed up. There was 3 people that were killed right in front of him, and he goes, "That's it, I'm done." And the guy literally walked off that. He may have ran off, to be honest with you. Oh, but that was the last time he ever was a cop. You never saw him again. He disappeared. Yeah. And there was 2 other people that same thing happened. There was even another person that was a seasoned cop that took his uniform off that night and just disappeared, and so forth. And it was a horrific event, of course, largest mass shooting in U.S. history. And so my point is that, you just never know what's coming around the next corner. And you're talking about things where, it kind of fills up your coffee cup, so to speak. And then if it gets to that point where you don't do anything to address it, ladies and gentlemen, I'll be honest with you. One of the reasons that I do this podcast is because it's a healthy hobby. I mean, seriously,
Right.
I enjoy just talking and interacting, and she's helping me right now, just by talking about this kind of stuff, and I think that's important.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
so when this thing happened, that 8 people that was killed, that happened the weekend that we were down in Louisiana. I mean, I was driving
Yeah.
back. And
Yeah.
so, when that thing happened, horrific situation, of course, that's life
Oh,
changing for these first responders that responded to stuff like that.
absolutely.
It's changed their, I mean, almost changes their DNA. So that's going to be one of those moments that they're never going to forget.
Yeah.
Hope,
No.
unless, of course, they do things like maybe I guess some things that they can do. What are some of the? I mean, how do you even start with something like that? I mean, I know I'm not asking about details specifically about what they talked about, but
Right.
how do you what do you do with something like that, and how do you even start listening or speaking to
Right.
somebody to where they don't just kind of walk off in another direction? How do you open it
Right.
up?
Well, one thing that I noticed when we were doing the CISM training is he pulled up on the PowerPoint like the cycle of how critical incident debriefings work, or diffusions, either one. It works for both. But what I notice is we start out and we allow them to stay in the cognitive part of their brain. So they're talking about what happened, right? So, we arrived on scene, this is what we saw, this is what we were experiencing. And then we shift a little bit and we say, okay, how did you feel about that? Like, what was the worst part? So now we're getting into the emotion part of it. And then we cycle back around, okay, what's one thing that you could, if you could get rid of or unsee or undo, what would that be? And what I realized is we are allowing them to process the trauma that they saw. The number one thing is that we want our right side of our brain, which is very emotional, visual imagery's there. We've got some memories there. And our left side is very logical. It's where our reasoning is, where order is, where language is. Well, we want those two sides to communicate. That's how we process out things. And so when I was noticing in our critical incident diffusions and debriefings, is I thought, you know what, we're giving them an opportunity to go ahead and start processing, because the brain likes narrative. To heal, talk about it, tell your story. Like you said, even sitting here together,
Yeah.
you're talking about this stuff. The brain likes narrative. It likes that complete story. And definitely, I know no one likes to talk about their feelings, but I always say you have to feel it to heal it.
Mhm.
You've got it. You have to allow it to connect, because if we don't process, if we keep all this stuff in our boxes, right, this wall is built between the right side and the left side. And this is where we start getting into some PTSD. This is where the brain is it's holding on to things and it's not going to let it go. That's why EMDR is I don't know if, and I think you and I talked a little bit about EMDR, the eye movement desensitization reprocessing. Is EMDR can break down that wall and allow that brain to communicate, to be able to process out that trauma. But unfortunately, Jason, once a neuron's created, we can't undo it. So all of those events that you've been to, from what you've smelled or what you've seen or what you've heard, unfortunately, we can't undo those pathways, but we can weaken those pathways up to where when they do respond, they're not so intense. And that's kind of the healing thing with EMDR, is it heals those pathways, but it never makes them go away. That's why we've got to unpack these boxes. That's why we've got to let, guys, like at the fire station, in between calls, sit around the table and talk. Like, give your guys like, hey, what do you think about that call? What went right? What went wrong? How are you feeling about it? Talking does some amazing things. So I really, at first, the CISM, I was really like, okay, let me see how, from a clinician standpoint, how we're breaking this stuff down. No, I've bought into it. That is
Well,
one way we can really try to stop some of the PTSD stuff.
one of the things that I can remember, we had a family that got killed by the two of the sons killed most of the family, and they had ordered like 3,000 rounds of ammunition, and they wanted to go on a killing spree. They wanted to just go out and I think they killed 5 or 6 people in the family,
Mhm.
and we got enlisted as a critical incidents response team because the department did not have one for their department. So they kind of asked us to come in for a debrief. And of course, I was like, absolutely. And one of the things, and you bring up something about vicarious trauma. And when you said that, I have 2 questions here, really. In my mind, and I'm not a psychologist, but the person that we have that's a counselor like yourself or a licensed social worker, I can't remember what her title was, but
Yeah.
she didn't want people really talking about the incident. And I was like in a group, and I was like, and here I was, and I'm like, but I would want to talk about it. I want to talk about it amongst my peers, the other people. This is what I'm feeling. Maybe somebody
Right.
else would, but then again, I can kind of see to a point, you don't want to give this other person additional trauma on top of the trauma they've already got. Is that
Right.
kind of, is that kind of the thing with this 8 people? And I'm just using that as an example. I don't want to pry, but on the 8
Yeah.
people that got the kids that get killed, is that something, did they do like group debriefs? And is that something that, or did you kind of shy away from that where it was more of an individual type of situation? I know there's
So-
probably some group. There has to be a
Yeah.
little bit.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and when you look at the CISM model, there's one-on-ones, which oftentimes, if it immediately after it happens, you're meeting with your person, peer-to-peer is very important. Hey, are you doing okay? Do you need some water? So you're really meeting that one-on-one peer-to-peer. You can go back for the fire department, we could go to the station and do some diffusing, just making sure everybody's okay. What do you need? How are you feeling? And then, of course, the debriefing. When you look at the CISM model, it's pretty structured on the questions that we ask. We have these little bitty cards. And oftentimes you will see us kind of read off the card because we have a step 1, step 2, step 3 process. And we typically don't deviate too much from that because you don't want to get into a lot of detail. Again, you want it to flow, but the big thing is you want them to talk about what they're feeling. You want them to talk about, hey, what have you been, physically, what have you been experiencing, the last, 72 hours? Because we want to kind of see where their head is at, but we definitely don't want to re-traumatize anybody. Here's what's also interesting. You're never going to have anybody in your debriefings that was not primary to that scene. If they're not part of the CIS team, if they're not directly involved in that call, you typically will, you're not going to, because then they become so if you have a guy from maybe B shift that comes in and the call happened on A shift with station, number 8 or whatever, now he becomes part of that, and we don't want to create that option, that scenario.
I think that's a great point. Yeah, that's a great point, especially in a firehouse, when the next shift comes in. I think it's almost, to tell you the truth, and we kind of ran into this when I was working in homicide, is that when, we have an officer involved shooting and stuff, it wasn't the officer that was the one that the shooter, the officer that shot, they weren't the ones that were really experiencing. They didn't seem to be as bad off as the ones that didn't shoot, that happened to be standing right there. They're the ones that are like second guessing their efforts and so forth. And I was almost, I saw more signs of problems with those guys that I did with the individual that actually acted, because they were doubting, why didn't I do it? What happened here?
Right. What was wrong with me? Yeah.
Right.
Was did I let my guys down? Did I do something wrong?
Right.
And one thing I always remind everybody is we're human and we're going to make mistakes. But at the end of the day, we do the best that we can with the tools that we have in our toolbox. And that's all anybody can ask us to do.
Yeah.
And, and you know your job. You've been trained very well to do your job, and you work with the tools that you have. And there's just some things that are just not in our control. And we got to be okay with that. And that's hard. That is very hard, because not having that control makes us somewhat vulnerable. And that doesn't always feel great.
Well, when I heard you speak down in Louisiana, you talked about 3 separate books. So let's take one of the books, just throw one of those books up, Amanda, and let's talk about each one of these. These were books that you really, you said these are the books that you need to read. And
yes.
So let's start with this one here and tell us what, and this is one that you really were high on. And,
Oh,
and
Dr.
so what's this? What's
Gilmartin.
this about? What's this about, and why is this something that's worthy of reading?
So Dr. Gilmartin, basically, what he did is he did a great job of explaining what the law enforcement, and again, he probably should have called it and even said he should have emotional survivor for first responders, because he does address them in there. But the thing that I loved about that book is he showed what the hypervigilance biological roller coaster looked like. And most people don't understand that. And so when you look at the biological hypervigilance roller coaster, you got to think, if this is your window of tolerance and you're up here on the job, you're alive, you're alert, you got your head on a swivel, you've got your heart rate up, blood pressure up, you're looking for threats, and you're like that for an 8-hour shift. Well, in my mind, I would think, well, if you went home, you would go back into your baseline. Oh no, but you drop below baseline. You become detached. You may isolate. You may zone out. You may dissociate. Because it takes 18 to 24 hours for you to return to baseline. And guess what's already happening? You're going back on duty. And he does a phenomenal job of explaining why that happens. But what I love about it is he gives great suggestions on how to work with that. But he also explains to the families, hey, when dad is home and he's not talking to you, it's not because you're not worthy or you're not good enough or unlovable. It's because this is where dad's been. And I think a lot of families, they don't understand that the cycle that these men and women go through. He also addresses, like you said, about the identity that I am an officer. He talks about it being very important that we go back to I used to go fishing. I used to hang out with family and friends. Like, you cannot let the job be your identity, because that job ends one day. And you've got to make sure that you're being intentional with the things that you do to make sure that doesn't happen. Because he said you can either be a victim or you can be a survivor. And a victim basically says, I have no control. I don't control my work schedule. I don't control, the staff. I don't control all the reports I have to write. But to be a survivor, what you do control. You know what? I control the time that I do certain things when I go home. Mm-hmm. I get to control that. I get to control what I do when I'm off duty. I get to control how I feel about things and I see things. Yeah. So he said, you know what? You're either going to be a victim or you're going to be a survivor, but you get to choose that.
Yeah. So once again, Dr. Gilmartin's book is called,
right.
What's the title of that book again?
Yep.
Emotional survival.
Yep.
So that's a must read.
That is a must read. Absolutely.
And it says on there in the small print, not only for the officers, but for their families to read.
Oh yes. I actually have someone I know that him and his wife actually read that book together, and that really changed a lot of things in their marriage. And it was beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. So I highly recommend that the officer, first responder, and the family members read it.
Okay. Well, Travis from Muskogee PD is writing in here because he said that they give a book to the family to read, and he said it's that book. It's that very book, which is great. What they gave to us in the Tulsa Police Department, I remember they gave it. It was called "I Love a Cop," and in that book, I don't know if you've ever heard of it or not, but I'm sure there's a mother load of those books out there. But what this book, I remember there was part of it when they'd have the family come in right before the cadets would graduate, and then just kind of like, this is kind of some things that, if your husband's sitting there and he's watching TV and he's not listening to you and he's just kind of focused on that when he gets off work, and they would talk about things like that, things that would be things that this is why maybe what's going on. And maybe they don't want to talk about what happened at work and stuff like that. But yet when you see them with their colleagues, they're talking about it, not even nothing. Yep. They won't shut up about it. And I've had experiences like that too. So let's talk about the second. Throw another book up there. I love it. Show us another book, Amanda, because these are 3 books. Widen the Window. That's a good one. So you talked about that. Yeah, talk about this one.
Oh, Dr. Elizabeth Stanley. I absolutely love her. She was a Army officer in the military, had a near-death experience in the Balkans. She actually is a professor at Georgetown University. The Department of Defense hired her to go in and to train Navy SEALs and I think Marine Recon to try to help widen their window. So Dr. Stanley says that we all have a window of tolerance. And in that window, we can tolerate anything that comes at us as long as our window's open. Doesn't mean that we like it. Doesn't mean that we're like, woo, it means like, okay, I can get through this or I can deal with this. Well, if that window starts to close, oh my goodness, suddenly I can't really tolerate things. And then if it closes, oh my goodness, that's pretty bad. I can go into two different levels. But she has created a program called MFit. So it's a mind fitness program. And so with the DOD, they hired her to train these Navy SEALs and these Marine Recon guys in 8 weeks. What they saw is that these guys, their windows stayed open even in a firefight. That their window did not close. I mean, they pulled blood work on them, looked at cortisol levels, they looked at EKG, heart rates, blood pressure, and they noticed that their windows tended to stay open. So what she realized is not only can this be a very preventative measure for PTSD, but it can also help almost cure PTSD. So she works a lot in the body and in the brain. And so I absolutely love her book. One of the techniques that we did when you were in my presentation is we did the contact points, which, again, it's getting in your body, finding out where your body really, you feel it the most, but it's creating safety in the brain. That's what it's doing. So she really just changed the ball game when it comes to how to try to be a little proactive when it comes to PTSD and trauma.
What do you mean by the contact points? Just briefly.
So remember when we were down in Marksville in my training, I used my husband's that big old orange boom box we had, or speaker. Yeah. Sorry, boom box probably shows my age. But it's where she said, okay, I want you to sit in your chair, preferably with your back against the wall, which, we couldn't, but she said, I want you, keep your eyes open or, close your eyes, whatever's comfortable. And she kind of had you do a body scan. And then she said, okay, I want you to feel where your butt and legs and back connect with the chair. And I want you to feel where that is the most. And I want you to sit with it. And I want you to feel that felt sense. And you're being supported by the chair. What I find interesting with some of my clients, they will actually cry when we do that because they'll say, for the first time, I actually feel supported.
Wow.
I'm like, oh my gosh, that's powerful. But it basically, again, it's creating safety in the brain because our brain stays so hypervigilant all the time. Our system is always revved up. And so these techniques actually can get the system to calm down. And when you do them consistently, you start leveling out. So things don't affect you as much, right?
So that brings me to my next question. And I maybe have the wrong person here, the wrong book. But you talked about in that class, and you have a name for it, but and this is something that everybody that's listening in here, you should try it. I challenge you to try this. All right. And I'm serious. Me and my wife tried it, and we did it more than once. And you talked about how you have your legs up against the wall and your torso is like you're in an L shape, but your legs are up against the wall.
Absolutely.
You can do it like on your bed. You can put your legs up against the wall or your headboard or something, and describe that. And what does that do for you? Because that was really, we noticed a difference. It was incredible. All right, so go ahead.
It's wonderful. It's actually a Pilates move. I didn't realize that they do it in Pilates and yoga, but you have your wall. And so you want to make sure like your butt is up against the wall as much as you can. And you want to put your legs straight up against the wall. So here's your butt, your back, and your head. So you're in that L 90-degree shape. And if you hold that pose for 60 seconds, it activates the parasympathetic nervous system that will calm everything else in your brain. So when I taught AP psychology, I used to say P equals peace. So your sympathetic nervous system is your stress. So that's activating the amygdala. Heart rate goes up, blood pressure goes up. I'm going into fight, flight, or freeze. So that's S equals stress. Well, when we do that pose, we're activating the parasympathetic nervous system. P equals peace. So we're bringing down the blood pressure. We're bringing down the heart rate. We're basically soothing the nervous system.
Yeah.
Well, one of my yoga instructors actually taught me the other day, Holly, she's fabulous. She said, even if you hold that pose for 3 minutes, that's almost like 3 hours of good sleep. That's
you said how many minutes? How many minutes?
3 minutes. 3 minutes is equivalent to 3 hours of good sleep.
Yeah. And what does like 10 minutes do? Because I think that's what we did. We did the 10-minute thing. And at first my wife was like, this is silly. I'm not going to do that. And I'm like, try it. And she tried it. And then she goes, okay. After she was like, all right, I actually feel better. And so,
give Tina a high five for me. Say high five.
She adores you, and she adores you.
Oh,
she really does. But anyway, so that's huge. And I wanted to make sure that we mentioned that. And is there something else with this last lady that we just talked about the window being open? Does she do something for first responders for free?
So she actually, you can take, and I think I put the link in there. You can take her 8-week program. If you are a first responder or military, you can sign up to take her program for free. It's an 8-week program. It's all online. She has you do all these demos, but you can actually take her program for free because she wants it to be available to people because it works. It's effective.
I need to find that. I need to find that again since we kind of had the mix up the last time. I'm going to try to find that. And if I can't find it in the meantime from today, we will show that link. Yeah, let's re-email that if you don't mind. Yeah. And then I'll reshare it because that's a huge deal. So an 8-week program for free, if you're a first responder, to be able to go through that, and you can't, and that's free is great.
Absolutely.
And name that L shape again one more time so people can research it. What's that called?
So it's just a yoga Pilates move, and it's just the
Pilates.
L shape.
Pilates move.
Yeah. It's just,
ladies and gentlemen, there are some YouTube videos in reference to that. So that's good stuff. And I'm telling you, I've done it personally, and it makes a difference. So the third book that you really liked, that you talked about, throw that third book up, Amanda, and it's The Body Keeps the Score.
Oh, Bessel. I will tell you this book, and now when Dr. Stanley wrote her book, Widen the Window, Bessel, or Dr. Van der Kolk, it's hard to say his name. He actually worked with her some on her book. I will tell you, The Body Keeps the Score is not a sprint read by any means. It is a marathon read. If you want to know anything and everything about trauma, that's the book to read. But I will tell you, it is very intense. If you've had any type of trauma, childhood trauma, anything like that, I'd suggest you read it really slow. Read a chapter, put it down for a day, process what you've read. You can get back into it. But I've had people read that book and tell me, Laura, I have felt for years that I was broken. And for the first time in my life, I don't feel so broken. Because your body, the body keeps the score. The body's doing what it was designed to do. We're not defective. We're not broken. Our bodies are responding exactly how they were designed to respond. I'm not any less than. I am a worthy person, and my body was just doing what it was trained to do. It is a one, and he does a lot of neuroscience stuff. It is very scientific, but it is a well worth read. You will see trauma in a whole new light. Bessel's absolutely amazing.
So what is it that he's telling you? That's that move that we're talking about. And I'm telling you, listen, and if you suffer from, and my wife from time to time, she suffers from like swollen legs. This really helps with the lymphatic, your lymph nodes. And it causes all that stuff to kind of go down there back to your abdomen to where your body can get rid of that. Okay. It's a good thing. I'm telling you right now. Matter of fact, I'm going to probably try to do that tonight. I've done this right after you said it. I said, all right, I'm going to do this. And I went straight back to Tina and I said, we're going to try this. And she goes, that sounds silly. And I said, we're doing it anyway. It's an order. Right. We're going to do it. And we did. And it was great. So Ladies, and all these books that she's talking about, just real quick, I want to mention this. All these books that she's talking about, you don't have to be a first responder. I mean, we all have stresses in our life. So all these books, you know, that's why I bring her on here. I don't bring on people to talk about nonsense that's not going to work. I knew it immediately when she's talking about this stuff. This stuff works. And so she's not going to waste your time or my time, or especially first responders, because we're already skeptical of everything. And so we're already going to be like, yeah, right. Okay, whatever. But all right, so good. So we've talked about these things. We've talked about the books, and you said that you just went up to Ohio for some sort of a retreat thing. Yes. Let's mention that. I don't want to forget that either.
So it's called the Bridge Retreat. So the Bridge Retreat, again, Joe Terry invited me and my husband to come in August. And whenever you've had a first responder who has had a critical incident of some sort or multiple critical incidences, and they are really struggling. They're struggling to cope. You know, they're having a really hard time. Maybe it's affecting their relationship, their families. This program invites the first responder and their spouse or their significant other. And it is a weekend retreat. So at that retreat, they will, you know, they'll go to workshops. They will, you know, meet with different people. I know one session I read in there that we're going to do yoga, which is amazing for trauma. But it's a retreat that not only helps the first responder, but it also helps the wife or the husband or the significant other. So it's a holistic approach to treat trauma within that first responder and that family. And so we're traveling up to Ohio in August. And the only thing, because we don't live in Ohio, we paid for our plane ticket, and they're covering everything else. They're covering our hotel expense. They're covering our food, our transportation to and from the airport. So this is, if you live in Ohio or around that surrounding area, I mean, this is no cost. Yeah, this is no cost to the first responder and their partner. Yeah. And again, Louisiana does have something similar to that. It's called PCIS, so Post Critical Incident Symposium, and that's actually in October. And that one you got to sign up for pretty quick because they only have so many spots available. But it's very similar, from what I'm understanding, to the Bridge Retreat. But we also have something like that in Louisiana. Of course, hotels covered, food's covered. And they cover all those expenses as well. Because again, it's not just about the first responder, but it's also, you know, the family suffers too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. There's another organization. There's probably a handful of these organizations, if not more. But they're one of them that in Oklahoma, they're really high on Mighty Oaks. That's one, and they have not only for the first responder, and they'll say, I think they actually cover them to get there too. I really don't remember, but I know that it's like a week long situation. They're there with other first responders from all over the country. And I don't really know much more than that. I haven't went, but I tell you, one of the things that our department did that I thought was really solid on their part is they actually give them duty days to be there. They don't make them take vacation time. They actually make it like special assignment days for them to attend. And I've heard good things about it. I mean, there's a guy that's really big on it it was one of my old partners from back in undercover days. That he's probably going to come on down the line to talk a little bit further on that. So let's talk about this other thing that I want to mention too, and that's you pulled out these rings. Amanda threw those rings up there, and we got a picture. She's got some there. They look like that, and she's got them in her hand right here. And she basically was handing out piles of these things, and she had a huge bag of these that you got these things off of Amazon. What are they, and what do these things do? And this is just one of many different things that you can use. So let's talk about these.
So this is called an acupressure ring. So I had somebody day before yesterday go, is that a ponytail holder? I'm like, oh no, boo, that's not a ponytail holder. Let me tell you what it is though. So an acupressure ring. So on your hand, you've got between your joints, you've got receptors on your fingers. And when those receptors are stimulated, it communicates to the brain safety. It communicates to the brain calmness. So when you take the ring and you just move the ring up and down, and you're going to do all 10 fingers. You're going to do all 10 fingers. It's going to create safety in the brain. It's going to create calmness. It's also a good fidget thing too. So if you're in a meeting and you're trying to concentrate, these are really good to kind of keep you in the zone. I kind of like my science. I run pretty tachycardic most of the time. And I remember the first time that I demoed these, I had, I think, 6 clients, and I was showing them every hour on the hour. Typically, my heart rate sitting can be at 110 easily. That day, my resting heart rate was about 83. So when I tell you these things work, they work. They are fabulous. I heard through the grapevine that when the mass shooting happened, there was somebody on scene. I will not name this person's name, but they know who I'm talking about. They actually had a bunch of these in their pocket, and they started to pass them. They passed them out on that scene.
Good.
Just to really try to help our officers and our first responders kind of be able to regulate, because they were really having a hard time. So these things are very effective. But yeah, Amazon, you can buy 30 of them for like $8. I buy about 200 because I'm constantly giving them out. You can ask the CISM people. I gave them out to yesterday and today.
No, I know, because I'm actually going to hand them out when I'm speaking across the country.
Yeah, they're great.
I'm going to do the same thing, because when you mentioned that and I started kind of playing around with it, I was like, man, these are great. I mean, I actually noticed, I noticed I felt calmer, more calm, and it's just something simple like that that makes a huge difference. And I had never heard of those. I've heard of the little bit of the anxiety, like the thing that's got like a ball bearing in the fabric that's really good for like witnesses on the stand and stuff like that.
Yep.
And
these would be great for witnesses on the stand.
Absolutely.
And they don't make any noise. They don't, but it is funny. When I used to see kids, I don't really see kids in private practice anymore, especially my little boys. I would always say, now you can't shoot them at people. Okay. And of course, what's the first thing that they do? Pew! They shoot. And I'd say, oh my gosh, what did I just tell you? Yeah.
Yeah. I'll tell you another thing. And if you go to episode number 7, I had Lexi Gage on here. She was a medical examiner, or she still is. She's a medical examiner investigator down in Oklahoma City. And she's the one that really kind of brought this to my attention. And with that fidget, the thing with the ball bearing in there, and she's got like beads and stuff that she'll have on her bag. And she's got different things. And she's big on aromatherapy also. That really, what does that do to somebody? What's going on there when you're dealing with these little fidget things and the aromatherapy? What does that do to the body to make you calm down?
So what it does is we have something called grounding. And so oftentimes when you look at the brain, and again, this is just the way the brain was designed. We are either trying to predict what's happening in the future, or we've got the past that's invading the present. So sometimes we really struggle to stay in this moment. And so when you use your senses, like the things that I see, or the things that I hear, or things that I taste, or things that I'm touching, I'm feeling, or even smelling, it's going to keep you closer to the front part of your brain. And it's going to keep you in the present moment. That was the one thing, even in the CISM training, we were talking about deep breathing and staying grounded and really teaching those techniques. But and the interesting thing about smell, when you were talking about the oils, is smell is the only sense that we have that bypasses the thalamus. It goes straight to where it's supposed to go. Everything else has to go to the thalamus, and then it's sent wherever from that point. So smell is very quick. It's very instant, but it also it adapts very quickly too. But that's what it is it's a grounding technique. So it's keeping you in the moment and keeping you out of the back of your head, as I talk about. Because the back of our head, that's where it's chaotic. Blood pressure is going up. It's the limbic system. It's, amygdala, fight, flight, or freeze. And so when we're in the back of our head, our front part of our brain is really not doing what it needs to do. And that's critical thinking. That's analysis. That's making good decisions. So we want to really try to stay in that front part of our brain.
And I know we're running close on time now, but what are your thoughts on like hypnosis? Is that something that I'm sure it has a role also if somebody opted to do that? I've done it before and I felt great, after I did it. I didn't think first, the first time I did it, ladies and gentlemen, was way back in the day when I smoked. and I did that thing, and I thought, man, I just got ripped off after they made us rip up our cigarettes and throw them in this bucket. I was like, yeah, that was $120 down the drain. I just got majorly ripped off, and then I didn't smoke again for like 7 years. So it was like, yeah, so it worked, but so, and I don't smoke now, and I haven't in many, many years, but my point is that, does that have a role, or what do you think of that?
So I don't know a whole lot about hypnosis, but I do feel like it has its place, just like acupuncture does, just like EMDR, just like, SGB, so I do feel like hypnosis has its place, and I feel like it's going to be different for every person that does it. I've had some clients that they've done hypnosis, and what I find interesting is sometimes it bridges the gap. Maybe there's something, a memory or something that they're struggling with, and they can't quite pinpoint where it's at. And sometimes the hypnosis relaxes them enough to be able to unlock that memory. And then they come in here and we actually are able to process it. So again, I think hypnosis has a place, just like acupuncture does, massage therapy, SGB, EMDR, ketamine therapy. Oh my gosh, there's, and that's the thing. There's so many therapies that we can use for trauma. We just have to have access to them. And sometimes the expense of them is kind of hard. So, just like, Joe Terry, her foundation pays for first responders to get help. And again, that's all through, fundraising and things like that. So, but we've got therapies out there that are very beneficial.
All right.
Very beneficial.
I'll stop touching buttons, Amanda. I'm sorry. It's probably clicking through there. I apologize for that. Hey, let's open up the phone line just in case. Throw up that phone number real quick. I want to at least give an opportunity for somebody to call in. If you've got that question, or a couple of you, she's agreed to take your calls. If you had that question, listen, we all deal with stress in life. We all do. And whether it's a death in the family, whether it's finances, whether it's, you had a wreck, it could be anything. Your kids are doing stupid stuff or whatever. I don't think that it's a bad idea to maybe kind of focus on yourself a little bit. And you gotta be, I'll tell you what, you gotta be disciplined enough to at least try it. I promise you.
Yeah.
And I promise you that if you try that, say it one more time, the L.
The L shape.
Try that, you will notice it. Just do it for 10 minutes. That's all you got to do. 10 minutes, and you're going to feel amazing. And I promise you that's the case. I don't know if we've got a caller or not. If we got a caller, throw them up there with a question. And if you don't, you don't. But if you do, call in. She doesn't mind taking your question if it's something that I did not ask or something along those lines. And if not, then that's fine too. But it is informative, JP. It really is. Yeah. And you know what? I can't do one of these episodes every week, but I think that this is paramount because look, we all are stressed. We all live in stress, and that's just kind of the way it is. And and we've got to do something to live longer. And what is the average life expectancy of a police officer and a firefighter? Do you know the number?
I think, well, we were figuring that out the other day. I think for a firefighter, they said it was 63. And I looked at my husband, he's actually here with me. How old are you? 50.
Have him poke his head in there.
Yeah, he's 53. And I said, and your life, it's average is 63. I said, oh, boo, we're in trouble. Yeah. We might as well start thinking about retirement right now.
Have Mr. Teutsch, have Mr. Teutsch stick his head over there so we can see him. To see a real firefighter in that area, and he's so supportive. It's good to see you. It's good to see you, buddy.
It's good to see you.
And welcome. And I'll tell you what, I think this is great because I noticed when he was watching, you're so lucky that you got somebody right there at the ready for you, and she's helping a lot of people. But thank you for being here. And so he's so supportive of her. I love it.
Yes.
And my wife thinks the world of the both of you. So
Well,
honestly,
tell her
Brent,
I'm still coming up there because
yeah,
we've got to go to the ballet together. So I
oh,
am going to come up.
absolutely,
Yes, absolutely.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So I guess we didn't get any callers, but that's okay. I'll tell you what. So oh yeah, we have a caller. Now let's take the call. We do have a caller.
Okay.
What's your question?
Hey, my name is Danny Couples.
Oh yeah, I know Danny.
Oh, you do? It's going to be a surprise. Hey, I got a question for you. All right, Merle. Actually, I was just going to say there's an exercise that I do during some of my classes, and I kind of stumbled on it by accident, I guess you might say. I walked into a group of people one day, a fireman in a fire hall, and they were talking about calls they had went on, and each call got worse and worse. As you know how it is when you're in a group, everybody's got a one up. I got a one up a call. I got a one up. I've got one worse, and it went on, and it was like walking into a just a fog, a thick fog, and everybody was like in that mood, like talking about all these bad calls. And I thought I'm gonna try something. I've been thinking about it for a long time, so I popped off as my call. I said, I was on this call one time, and it was a bad when we walked in the house. My partner and I did. It was a dead body call because everybody was outside, and we walked in, and it's just like really quiet. And there's this dead man in the back room. I mean, he had been dead for several hours, and it was just like really nasty. And I asked my partner if he would go back outside at that time and get a body bag. And when he left, when he went outside, I hid in a closet. And when he made his way back in, it was really quiet, and you could hear the floor squeaking, the screen door opening. And when he walked by me, I jumped out and scared him, and he threw that body bag straight up in the air and ran out the house and tripped down the stairs. And police were drawing the guns. They didn't know what was going on. And we laughed about that for days. We still laugh about it. But when I told that story, that whole fog in that room went away, and everybody was laughing. It's like it changed something. It took that mood of being in that place and just put it in a whole another level. So I use that exercise in some of my classes. Have you ever tried that, Laura?
I haven't tried it, but I heard that laughter is the best medicine. And sometimes, they always talk about, first responders, how they have the dark humor and things like that. Well, you know what? In order to do what you do, sometimes you just have to. So I love that everyone laughed. I love that. Laughter is the best medicine.
That's a good exercise, and I proved it does work in just about every class that I do. And I'm gonna say one more thing that I don't know. I know Jason knows Tyler Burns. He's on his podcast. He's been a guest on Jason's show, and I've been a guest on his show. He said something one time during one of his shows. It's like, let's break this stigma. And the stigma was I've been a first responder for almost 40 years, 37 and change. But we've always had this thing when someone asks, what's the worst call you ever been on? And we've always said, why do they do that? They're making us stir that memory back up. And we always say, don't do that. That's the worst question. But the stigma is the stigma. That's not really a bad thing. We've learned that that's actually, in a sense, a good thing. It actually brings that memory back out. And the more you talk about things like that, to me and to a lot, it seems like it actually makes it better. It's easier to carry. What is your thoughts?
And one of those things, I think unfortunately, I think people have to learn to read the room. I think there's some people that are like you that are very comfortable, sharing those stories. You may have some guys that aren't. But again, whenever we're talking about it, we are creating a narrative to what we experience, and that a narrative can help us heal from that. So I mean, I think it just depends on the person.
Yeah.
I mean,
absolutely.
This joker over here, I could probably ask him that question. He'd say, "Oh, how much time do you have?" I've got several of them.
Right.
And he'd be okay with it. And some
You
people
got
are,
a
they
good
aren't.
point about reading the room. You're absolutely right there. I think it probably might not work on some, but I think it would work on most if they would try it at like little bites at a time.
Yeah. There's a friend of mine that was one of the rescuers of the Oklahoma City bombing, and I really appreciate this guy. And I'm not going to mention his name, but I've tried to get him on here, but he's not going to come on here. But he privately, he's talked to me in depth about some of that experience of being in that building and what he saw, etc. And he's when I've talked to him and said, hey, I wouldn't mind having you on to talk about it, but he's like, no, I'm not opening up that door again. I mean, he talked about it to me because he knew that I would kind of know about it, but he's like, I no.
Well, and he felt safe with you. He felt safe enough to be able to talk to you about it.
And I think his wife was like, yeah, we don't really want to open that door either. So, but he still was very candid about it, and I appreciated the fact that he was very open about it because I wanted to know. But so Travis had said something that the average is like 18 pension checks. That is what you get after retirement before they die, and that's the average. And I think that's absolutely crazy. So what we need to do is we need to increase that. I want to live 20 years plus when I'm retired. More. I want to 30 years. I don't care. I want to sleep in, wake up when I want.
Right.
Nothing if that's what I want, but I want to live a long time. But I think part of that, you got to be active, and you can't just be sitting there and doing nothing and being miserable. So we've given you a lot of good tools. At least Lora has. She's given you a lot to think about. Ladies and gentlemen, I think this episode was great. You see what I'm talking about? That's why I had her on here. That's why I was so sick about it last week and Danny stepped in and he was great. And we had a great conversation, but this is some good stuff that you can really, with 3 great books, some really inexpensive anxiety toys, so to speak.
Yeah.
You got some great, and we're going to get, I'm going to get that link. She's going to send it to me, and I'll make sure that we have it on the next week's episode. I'm sorry I didn't have it this time, but that's for the free 8-week class that you can get. Yeah. And man, you can't beat that. And Lora, I just appreciate you being here. Thank you for coming on. And
I appreciate you inviting me on, because again, we've got to get mental health for first responders is important. We've got to break the stigma. I think there was a question that asked me how many, what's the percentage of first responder departments that have specialists? I don't think it's many. I know Houston Fire Department does. Other than that, I don't know of any. I don't know of any here in Louisiana, except, Ben has hired me. So I am fortunate for that. And I'm grateful for them.
Most of the smaller departments in Oklahoma do not. They just don't. And we just need to, I'm all about it. I think it's great. I think the bigger departments need to kind of be the big brother in the room, and they need to step up and be there for the smaller departments and be more accessible. And they need to be that we have the ability to do it. And I think that we should be able to, I think there needs to be more of it where we're actually willing to be a part of that. I've seen a little bit of resistance from time to time because I think they're afraid of opening up that door, but I think that we should be there for the smaller places. I know when I speak, I talk about wellness at the end of you saw it. You didn't know that was coming, but I actually already had stuff that you had talked about in yours, and I talked about it in mine about EMDR music and stuff, and you were shocked. And I didn't change that because I'd seen yours. I've been talking about that for a long time. So listen, I value our friendship. I appreciate your husband loaning us to us tonight, and you're always welcomed in the future. And feel free, if there's something that's really something we need to know about, we'll just have you back on. Just let me know.
Absolutely.
By the way, was this not? I know that last week was kind of a train wreck because of whatever the technical difficulties. But was that your first? Is this your first ever podcast to be a part of?
First ever podcast.
Excellent.
First ever.
I love that because you're
excited.
That's awesome. Yep. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to appreciate everybody for joining us on this Friday night on Memorial Day weekend. Is there any final thoughts that you want to is there anything else that I didn't ask you that they really need to know before we get off of here?
I think we covered it all. I think we
covered a lot.
Covered it all.
We covered a lot
did.
of ground.
We did. Yeah.
Thank you for the call, Danny. Thank you, Laura.
Yeah.
This show is not a show without
you.
people like you that are dedicating, that are moving mountains out there, really. Travis, I think I agree with you. Phenomenal information tonight. I think it was a great show. And when we click off of here after the outgoing music, stick around, Laura. And so don't click off. Ladies and gentlemen, the show is not a show without you. For those of you that have not subscribed to this channel, we've got 4,402 subscribers. That's awesome. I love it. And I want to double that the next year. Remember, subscribe, please. This show is not, like I said, I really do appreciate you guys being here. I'm on everything. I'm on Instagram. Follow me on there. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Twitter too, but forget about Twitter. Twitter's a weird place. But TikTok, believe it or not, I'm not up there twerking, but man, TikTok's a lot of fun. And I got a lot of followers on there too. But you can also follow me on my Detective Jason White Facebook page. And I interact with people. So even though I was on TV, I don't care. I'm nobody special. I interact with you. I love the comments. And if you have anybody that you know of in the world of really in the world, that's somebody that's moving mountains and you think they'd be a great guest, let me know who they are. And maybe we'll bring them on in the future. I just don't have an endless supply. So until next time, ladies and gentlemen, I really appreciate all the comments and you guys jumping in there and being here tonight, really on your 3-day weekend. Have a safe 3-day weekend. And next week, I hope to see you back. Until then, take us out, Amanda.